In this film, we consider the possibility that Shakespeare visited northeast Scotland about the time when he was writing Macbeth. Shakespeare lived in Elizabethan England, spending much of his life in Stratford and London, but there's much not recorded about his life. Macbeth lived during the 11th century in a warlike period in Scotland when kings could be challenged to fight to the death. Much of his life is legend. Shakespeare's play was written in the reign of James I, about the time of the Gunpowder Plot. It has threads of several different themes. His audience was primarily the king. His group were called the King's Men because James Stuart was their patron, but it also had popular appeal. The action in the first half of the play is set in the area of Moray, an ancient kingdom, an area well known to the king because his nephew, Lord Moray, lived at Darnaway, nearby. Both Moray and Cawdor had lost their fathers in murders in 1591. At Cawdor Castle, the main room on the first floor is the sitting room. It would have been a living room in Shakespeare's time. 7 years after Shakespeare died, a collection of his plays was published in 1623, published according to the true original copies, so the authors had his original handwritten scripts. Although he might have collaborated, Shakespeare is the one who's credited with the plays. The list of 26 principal actors has Shakespeare named at the top, and they're all men. 14 comedies, 10 histories, 11 tragedies. Macbeth is one of the tragedies. Notice that stage directions are very limited in the original. Let's look at Act 1, Scene 3.
Macbeth, so foul and fair a day I have not seen. Banquo, how far is't called to forests? What are these so withered and so wild in their attire, that look not like the inhabitants of the earth, and yet are on't? Live you, or are you aught that man may question? You seem to understand, by each at once her chappy finger laying upon her skinny lips. You should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so.
In this scene, all played by men, Macbeth and Banquo are travelling to Forres. They've just been fighting rebels from the northwest. The current road, the A96, follows the same route as the ancient road. Midway between Nairn and Forres, the road passes what used to be a moor. The area is called Hardmere or Hardmoor. Local tradition has it that this is where Macbeth met the witches. There are 3 small hillocks, and the largest one is called Macbeth's Hillock. If you were staying at Cawdor Castle and you had to go to Darnaway, you would go along this route because Cawdor is about 5 miles southwest of Nairn. This location dates from about 1370. An earlier tower house stood about a mile away.
Duncan, this castle hath a pleasant seat. The air nimbly and sweetly recommends itself unto our gentle senses.
In Act 1, Scene 6, Shakespeare gives his audience a sense of what Cawdor Castle is like. The birds make their nests here. The air is sweet and delicate. The heaven's breath smells wooingly here, and he uses the phrase, "I have observed," in the lips of Banquo. I know this castle very well because I grew up round here, and I have to say, his description is very accurate. By contrast, here is a castle which is bleak and windswept, Lochindaub Castle. It sits in the middle of a loch. Cawdor has been altered since Shakespeare's time. You can still see the remains of narrow windows. The original entrance was through an arched opening on the first floor. The main entrance today is here into a wing built later in the 17th century. On the west side there is a burn that runs past, which once upon a time maybe fed the moat. In summer, the gardens are a riot of colour, with all sorts of plants. 2 students from Brighton came here for 2 weeks and produced this work, inspired by the lush environment. The beds hum with the sound of the bees. If you put out bird food like nuts and seeds, it's not long before the chaffinches and the blue tits come to feed. For Shakespeare, it would not have been safe to travel alone to an area like Moray in the early 17th century, unless he was part of the royal entourage. Suppose the king, after over a year in London, wanted to tour Scotland and see his loyal nobles, check his defences, and enjoy his passion for hunting. Then he might have brought his players, the king's men, and he might have said to William Shakespeare, "Can you write a Scottish play?" The obvious place for the king to stay was with his nephew at Darnaway. It was a royal hunting lodge, and the forest is still intact. If Shakespeare had come to Moray, he would have seen these places firsthand. He would have heard the local legends and the details of the murderous plots like that against Moray and Cawdor. If the king knew this area well, then Shakespeare needed to be accurate in his descriptions. He had the opportunity to explore themes which resonated with the king. He could draw parallels with the events in the reign of James's mother, Mary, Queen of Scots. He could make his play as authentic as he wanted and elaborate with some characters. For example, Banquo is thought to be an invented character. Later in the play, Shakespeare refers to the forest at Burnham. The army moving towards Dunsinane cut trees to disguise their numbers. Perhaps this happened in some dim and distant battle. Burnham Wood is located near Dunkeld. You pass it on the road south towards Perth. Dunsinane was a Pictish fort near Perth. It might well have been used by the 11th century kings. A castle like Cawdor takes on a different feeling at night when you only have a candle to give you light. On the ground floor in the castle there is an ancient tree which has been dated 1370. The stonework on the tower spiral stairs is marked with mason's marks, and where swords have been sharpened in the stonework. Suppose the royal entourage cannot all fit at Darnaway. Some have to stay at Cawdor. Imagine a southerner like Shakespeare making his way to bed after a late whiskey with a candle in his hand. So it's possible that Shakespeare stayed in this castle or visited this castle. Maybe he came up these stairs with a candle like me. If he did come and stay here on a dark night like tonight, it would have been quite easy to get the detail, the feeling, the description of some of these places. I think he would have been very inspired.